Lucas McKay had always known struggle. Raised by his uncle in a small rundown apartment on the outskirts of town, he learned early on that life wasn't going to hand him anything. With a childhood full of sacrifices, he grew up valuing every cent. Lucas wasn't naive. He knew the weight of working hard for what you needed. His parents had passed away when he was just a toddler, and his uncle, James, had stepped in to raise him. But James wasn't well off. He did what he could, working long hours just to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. Growing up, Lucas was smart and hardworking. He balanced school with a part-time job at a local diner, where he washed dishes and took out the trash. In high school, he always did his best to keep his head down, focusing on getting good grades and staying out of trouble. But that wasn't always easy. Ryan Carter, the golden boy of the school, came from one of the wealthiest families in town. He had everything Lucas didn't: expensive clothes, flashy cars, and all the popularity one could want. And he didn't waste a second reminding Lucas of their stark differences. Ryan and his group of friends made it their mission to humiliate Lucas whenever they got the chance. They would taunt him for his cheap clothes, make fun of his second-hand backpack, and laugh when he pulled out a packed lunch instead of buying from the cafeteria. Ryan would say things like, "Hey Lucas, did you have to work another double shift just to afford that PB&J?" And to make matters worse, Lucas had been dating Sarah, a girl he believed was different. She was kind and supportive, or so he thought. Sarah had been one of the few people who saw beyond Lucas's financial situation, or so he had believed. She had cheered him on in his studies, encouraging him to dream big and work hard. Lucas thought she cared about who he was as a person. They'd been together since high school, and he couldn't imagine his life without her. Despite the mocking and the hardships, Lucas had always held on to his dreams, convinced that he would one day make something of himself. He believed he could work his way to a better life and perhaps give Sarah the future she deserved. As they grew older, however, Lucas began to notice subtle changes in Sarah's behavior. She'd started to complain about their lack of nice things. She would compare him, sometimes even jokingly, to others who had more. And recently, she'd started spending more time with Ryan's group, attending parties and outings Lucas couldn't afford to go to. Every time she mentioned a night out with Ryan and his friends, Lucas felt a pang of insecurity. Still, he brushed it off, convincing himself that she just needed a break from the struggles of their relationship. After all, didn't she tell him she loved him? On the night of Sarah's birthday, Lucas had been saving up for weeks to take her out. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a small, cozy Italian restaurant where he'd saved up enough to cover a nice meal and a little gift. He was nervous and excited, hoping this small gesture would remind her how much she meant to him. But when he arrived at her place to pick her up, he was greeted with an uncomfortable surprise. She wasn't there. Confused, Lucas called and texted her but got no response. Finally, he remembered her mentioning a high-end restaurant downtown that she wanted to visit. Lucas decided to check there, hoping maybe she had stopped by to meet friends and would be on her way back soon. When he arrived, what he saw was worse than he could have imagined. Through the glass window of the upscale restaurant, Lucas saw Sarah laughing, seated at a candlelit table with none other than Ryan Carter. They were dressed to impress, surrounded by luxury and warmth. Lucas's heart pounded as he watched Ryan hand her a small, glimmering gift box. He didn't need to see inside to know it was something he could never afford. As he stood frozen, his phone finally buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Lucas, I think we should take a break. I can't keep doing this." The words were a slap in the face, but nothing compared to what happened next. Sarah, glancing out the window, caught sight of Lucas standing there, his heart visibly shattered. Instead of coming out to explain or offer any kind of comfort, she exchanged a few words with Ryan, who then walked out with her by his side. Smirking, Ryan looked Lucas up and down and said, "Sarah deserves better than some washed-up nobody. Move on, McKay, you'll always be at the bottom." Humiliated and devastated, Lucas could hardly move. He stumbled back to his small apartment, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on him. Every moment of their relationship, every kind word Sarah had ever spoken to him, felt like a cruel joke. His dreams of a future with her shattered, and the pain of betrayal ran deep. Alone in his tiny, dimly lit room, Lucas let the reality of his circumstances wash over him. It felt like the entire world was against him, like he would never escape the cycle of struggle and heartbreak. Early the next morning, with barely any sleep and a dull ache lingering in his chest, Lucas's phone rang. It was an unknown number. He ignored it at first, but it rang again and again, as if demanding his attention. Finally, he answered, a mix of frustration and exhaustion in his voice. "Hello?" he muttered. "Mr. Lucas McKay?" A voice on the other end asked, sounding formal. "We've been trying to reach you regarding an inheritance claim." "An inheritance?" Lucas replied, confusion tinged with bitterness. He didn't have anything, let alone something to inherit. "Yes, sir. We believe you are the sole heir to the McKay estate. We need you to come to our office immediately to discuss the details," the voice said, professional but firm. Lucas's heart skipped a beat. In a single moment, his life of nothingness took on a new possibility. Had he misunderstood his life this whole time? The word estate lingered in his mind as he tried to make sense of what he just heard. Could this be real? Had his life been something completely different from what he had believed? With a mixture of disbelief, curiosity, and a glimmer of hope, Lucas set out for the law office. Little did he know that this was the beginning of a journey that would change everything. When Lucas arrived at the law office, he felt as if he were stepping into another world. The lobby was vast, with polished marble floors, high ceilings, and mahogany walls. The receptionist looked up with a polite smile, seemingly unfazed by his casual clothes and weary expression. "Mr. McKay?" she asked, eyeing him briefly before directing him to a private office down the hall. As he walked through the pristine corridors, he felt completely out of place, his mind racing with questions. Inside the office, an older man with silver hair and sharp eyes sat behind a large desk stacked with files. "Mr. McKay, I'm Robert Hensley, the executor of your family's estate. Please have a seat." Lucas sat, still struggling to understand what was happening. He was used to small spaces, cramped apartments, and hand-me-downs. This room, with its leather chairs and heavy, expensive furniture, felt like it belonged in a movie. "Now, I'm sure this is all a bit overwhelming," Hensley began, looking at Lucas with a mix of sympathy and curiosity. "But let me be clear, your parents, the late James and Alice McKay, left behind a substantial estate. For reasons known only to them, they arranged for you to inherit it upon reaching the age of 20. As of today, Mr. McKay, you are the rightful owner of a fortune valued at over $50 million, along with controlling shares in McKay Enterprises." Lucas blinked, his mind blank. $50 million? McKay Enterprises? None of this made sense. There must be some mistake," he stammered. "I grew up with nothing. My uncle raised me. He never mentioned any of this." Hensley nodded. "Your uncle, James McKay Sr., was instructed not to reveal your inheritance until you reached this age. Your parents wanted you to live a humble life, to understand the world without privilege before stepping into the responsibilities of your family's legacy." He handed Lucas a letter, the edges worn, with his name written in delicate script. "This letter is from your parents. They wrote it for you, to be delivered upon the transfer of their assets." With shaking hands, Lucas opened the envelope, his parents' handwriting familiar yet distant. The letter read, "Dearest Lucas, if you're reading this, then you are now old enough to understand the weight of the McKay legacy. We know this may come as a shock, but we wanted you to grow up without the pressures and entitlements that wealth brings. Your Uncle James has taken care of you all these years, knowing we left you everything we built. Use this gift wisely. Remember that true wealth lies not in material things but in character and kindness. With all our love, Mom and Dad." The room spun. His parents had been wealthy, and they'd chosen not to tell him? All these years he had struggled, felt ashamed of his circumstances, and yet he was meant to inherit a life of luxury. The betrayal felt fresh and raw, not just from his parents, but from his uncle too. How could they have kept this from him? Hensley's voice cut through his thoughts. "The McKay name is well known in certain circles, Mr. McKay. The company your parents built deals primarily in real estate and investment holdings. While it's been managed by trustees, you now have full control. The wealth, the properties, the shares, they're all yours." Lucas could barely process what he was hearing. Just yesterday, he was a nobody in the eyes of the world, humiliated by his ex-girlfriend and belittled by his high school bully. Now he was being told he owned an empire? The irony of it all was almost cruel. The very people who had looked down on him would now probably envy him. Or worse, want something from him. "Mr. McKay, there's one more thing," Hensley continued, his expression serious. "You will be expected to attend shareholder meetings, oversee major decisions, and take an active role in managing your assets. Given the size of the McKay holdings, it's advised you assemble a team of advisors. We can help facilitate this process, or you may choose your own people." The idea of running a company, managing assets, and taking on such responsibilities felt overwhelming. But there was a part of him, a small, newly awakened part, that felt an undeniable pull toward the challenge. He wasn't the poor, helpless boy from yesterday anymore. He had resources now, power even, and for the first time in his life, he had choices. As he left the law office, Lucas's mind buzzed with possibilities. He could start fresh, leave his old life behind, and embrace his new identity as the heir to the McKay fortune. Or, he could keep this newfound wealth a secret and live as he had before, quietly and without attention. But as he walked back toward his modest apartment, an idea took root. If people had always judged him for being poor, what would they think now that he was rich? That night, Lucas lay awake, contemplating how to move forward. His heart still stung from Sarah's betrayal, and the humiliation he had endured from Ryan left a bitter taste. He thought about all the times people had dismissed him, looked down on him, or treated him as if he were invisible. Now, with his new resources, he could finally have the chance to turn the tables. Over the next few days, Lucas began to plan. He would keep his inheritance a secret for now, playing the role of an anonymous investor, appearing out of nowhere. He would enter Ryan's world, attend the same places, and subtly make his presence known. It was risky, but if he was careful, he could maintain the facade long enough to achieve his goal, to expose those who had only valued him for what he didn't have, and to see if Sarah and Ryan's loyalty extended beyond money. Lucas spent hours poring over documents, reading up on investments, learning about the company he now owned, and building the knowledge he would need to step into his new role. With the legal team's help, he quietly set up a series of accounts under a pseudonym, making it possible for him to start investing without drawing attention. He leased a high-end apartment in a part of town where Ryan often hung out, transforming his appearance to match the polished, affluent lifestyle that his wealth now afforded him. His transformation was striking. He went from wearing old sneakers and faded jeans to tailored suits and designer shoes. But beyond the clothes in the apartment, he felt something shifting inside him. There was a growing confidence, a certainty he had never felt before. He was no longer the struggling boy desperate for approval. He was now a man with control, purpose, and an objective. By the end of the week, Lucas was ready to enter the social circles of those who once belittled him. The first stop on his new journey was an elite cocktail party frequented by Ryan's circle. He would go there, meet new people, and little by little, test who valued him for more than appearances. As he looked in the mirror, adjusting the cufflinks of his suit, Lucas took a deep breath. The boy he once was had been left behind, replaced by a man determined to claim his place in the world. The stage was set, and Lucas McKay was ready to make his entrance. Lucas's heart raced as he entered the luxurious, dimly lit room where the cocktail party was being held. Chandeliers glittered overhead, casting a soft glow over the wealthy crowd, their laughter and conversation filling the air. He felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. This world was new to him, yet he felt oddly at ease. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit and exuding quiet confidence, Lucas knew he looked every bit the part. It was a sharp contrast to the boy who had once walked the halls of high school in worn sneakers, invisible to the very people who now turned their heads in curiosity. As he passed out, he planned every detail of this night with precision. Lucas had transformed into Luke Caldwell, an up-and-coming investor with a mysterious background. Through his lawyers and advisors, he had arranged everything meticulously, establishing himself as a quiet but influential newcomer in the investment world. Luke was well-versed in finance, sharp with numbers, and carried an aura of wealth and mystery, a persona that was already attracting attention. As he moved through the crowd, Lucas spotted Ryan across the room, holding court with his usual entourage. Sarah was by his side, dressed in an elegant gown, her eyes sparkling as she laughed at Ryan's jokes. Lucas felt a twinge of the old hurt, but he quickly brushed it aside. He was no longer the boy Sarah could belittle or the target of Ryan's mockery. Tonight, he was Luke Caldwell, and he was here to rewrite the narrative. With a deep breath, Lucas approached the bar, ordering a drink with an air of calm. He knew he had to be careful. He couldn't afford to come across as overly familiar or eager. Instead, he positioned himself within earshot of Ryan's group, feigning interest in his drink while waiting for the right moment. It didn't take long. One of Ryan's friends, intrigued by Lucas's quiet presence and polished look, introduced himself. "I don't think we've met before. I'm Caleb, and you are?" Lucas turned to face him, offering a polite nod. "Luke Caldwell. I've just moved back to the area," he said smoothly. "Investment and real estate mostly." He kept his tone measured, allowing curiosity to do the work for him. Caleb's eyes widened, clearly impressed. "Real estate, huh? That's big money. You should meet Ryan Carter. His family's pretty much owned this town for generations." Caleb gestured over to Ryan's group, and Lucas felt a surge of satisfaction. Everything was falling into place. Ryan looked up as they approached, and Lucas could see the flicker of interest in his eyes. The tables had turned. Tonight, Lucas was no longer an outsider. He extended a hand, meeting Ryan's gaze with a steady, confident expression. "Luke Caldwell," he introduced himself. "Ryan Carter," came the reply, with a hint of caution. Ryan's smile was polite, but Lucas could see the wheels turning. He didn't recognize Lucas, of course. To Ryan, he was just another wealthy stranger, a potential ally, or rival, in the game of wealth and influence. Sarah's reaction, however, was more complex. Her smile faltered, a look of confusion flashing across her face as she studied Lucas's features. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't quite place it. Lucas felt a moment of satisfaction as she shifted uncomfortably, caught off guard by his sudden appearance in their world. For the next hour, Lucas navigated the conversation with practiced ease. He listened attentively, shared just enough about his background to intrigue, and subtly mirrored the attitudes of those around him. He dropped hints about recent acquisitions and lucrative deals, all carefully designed to pique their interest without revealing too much. As the night went on, he observed Ryan's group closely. He could see their hidden insecurities, their unspoken hierarchies, and the way they jockeyed for status within their circle. Ryan, despite his arrogance, seemed tense. Lucas noticed him glancing at his phone more than once, his jaw tight with frustration. It was clear that Ryan's world wasn't as stable as it appeared. Lucas recalled what he'd learned from his advisors. Ryan's family was indeed facing financial troubles, and his father's business was in decline. It wasn't long before Sarah approached Lucas, her curiosity finally getting the best of her. "Luke, right? You seem familiar. Have we met before?" she asked, her eyes narrowing as she searched his face. Lucas gave her a polite smile, feigning a thoughtful expression. "I don't believe so, but it's possible we've crossed paths." He paused, enjoying the subtle unease in her eyes. "Small world, isn't it?" For a moment, Sarah seemed to relax, charmed by his polite demeanor and quiet confidence. She laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "So, what brings you here? You don't seem like someone who's from around here." "I've been away for a while," Lucas replied, keeping his answer vague. "But it was time to come back, reconnect, and expand." His words were deliberate, layered with a meaning that only he understood. He could see her intrigue grow, a spark of interest igniting in her gaze. The very girl who had looked down on him now seemed eager to know more about this stranger. With wealth and mystery. As the evening wore on, Lucas continued to weave himself into Ryan's circle, winning over their friends and subtly positioning himself as an equal, if not a competitor. It was clear that Ryan felt threatened. He made an effort to match Lucas's stories with tales of his own success, though the strain in his voice was unmistakable. Just as the party was winding down, Ryan's phone buzzed again. This time, he stepped away, his face pale as he took the call. Lucas, ever observant, noted the concern in Ryan's expression, the tightness of his grip on the phone. It was a private moment, but one that confirmed what Lucas already knew. Ryan's family was in trouble, and the cracks in his seemingly perfect life were beginning to show. The night ended with handshakes and polite farewells, but Lucas felt triumphant as he left. He had made his entrance, tested the waters, and established himself as a new player in their world. Ryan's friends were curious, Sarah was intrigued, and Ryan himself was clearly unsettled. Everything was going according to plan. As he returned to his new apartment, a sleek, modern space overlooking the city, Lucas allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. His carefully crafted facade had held up, and he had successfully embedded himself within Ryan's inner circle without arousing suspicion. He was no longer the invisible, humiliated boy of yesterday. He was Luke Caldwell, a man of wealth, power, and hidden intentions. For the first time, Lucas felt the thrill of control. He was playing a game with high stakes, but he was confident in his abilities. He was ready to expose the true nature of those who had wronged him, to reveal their weaknesses, and to reclaim the dignity they had stripped from him. The wheels were in motion, and there was no turning back. Lucas knew that he couldn't let emotions cloud his judgment. He had to remain focused, to see each interaction as a piece of his plan. And as he looked out over the glittering city lights, he allowed himself a small smile. This was just the beginning. After the cocktail party, Lucas found himself increasingly drawn into Ryan's social circle. Invitations poured in, dinners, events, gatherings of the wealthy and powerful. Lucas, as Luke Caldwell, was the new, mysterious figure in town, and his background in real estate and investments made him an instant subject of intrigue. Every time he showed up, people greeted him warmly, eager to know more about his secrets to success. He played along, effortlessly weaving a web of half-truths and strategic silences. Despite all the attention, Lucas never lost sight of his goal. He observed Ryan's every move, listening intently to conversations and watching the subtle tensions that surfaced within the group. Ryan's insecurities were becoming more apparent, especially to someone who now knew the truth. The Carter family was on the brink of financial collapse. What few people knew was that Ryan's father had made a series of bad investments, and they were desperate to keep up appearances. Lucas couldn't deny a sense of satisfaction as he watched Ryan struggle to maintain the illusion of control. One evening, Lucas found himself at a private event hosted at an exclusive rooftop bar, a gathering place for the wealthiest people in the city. Sarah arrived later, glancing around as if searching for someone, and Lucas felt her gaze settle on him. She walked over, wearing an expression that mixed curiosity with something else, something almost regretful. "Luke," she began, her voice soft. "I keep thinking that we might have met before. I don't know, you seem familiar." Lucas tilted his head, giving her a thoughtful look. "I've traveled a lot, and I've met many people along the way. Maybe we crossed paths in passing," he replied, his voice measured and calm. He let his eyes linger on her, watching as she grew visibly intrigued. Sarah had fallen into his trap, but he kept his composure, waiting for her to make the next move. As the night progressed, Lucas continued to gather information, subtly steering conversations toward topics that revealed more about Ryan's situation. It turned out that Ryan had been quietly seeking investors to expand his family's business. But Lucas knew the truth. Ryan was trying to save it from going under. Despite his bravado, Ryan was grasping at straws, desperate to prevent the downfall that loomed on the horizon. Just as he was savoring this revelation, another unexpected figure entered the picture. Sophie Kingston, a young businesswoman and the daughter of a renowned investor, appeared at the event. Sophie was intelligent, respected, and, most importantly, connected. She was someone Lucas had heard of but never met. Rumor had it she could see through people in an instant, reading their true intentions with ease. Lucas hadn't expected to cross paths with her, but the moment they made eye contact, he knew she could be either an ally or a dangerous obstacle. Sophie approached Lucas with a raised eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Luke Caldwell, right?" she asked, her tone professional but with a hint of challenge. "That's right," Lucas replied, matching her gaze. "And you must be Sophie Kingston. I've heard about your investment acumen." Sophie gave a slight smile, her eyes studying him carefully. "I hear things too, Luke," she replied. "Word travels fast in our circles, especially about people who seem to appear out of nowhere." Lucas laughed, feigning casualness. "A mystery can be a useful tool, don't you think?" "Perhaps," Sophie replied, unfazed. "But mysteries also attract attention. Attention that sometimes leads to questions." She paused, letting her words linger. "Questions like, Where did you really come from, and why are you here? Lucas met her gaze steadily, refusing to let her intimidate him. I'm here for the same reason most people are, he said smoothly. To explore opportunities and, if I'm lucky, make some meaningful connections. Sophie nodded slowly, seeming to accept his answer for now. But he knew she wasn't convinced. She was testing him, and Lucas was acutely aware that one slip-up could ruin everything. Sophie wasn't just another wealthy socialite. She was perceptive and intelligent, capable of seeing through any facade. Lucas made a mental note to tread carefully around her. She could either be a formidable ally or a dangerous adversary. Throughout the evening, Lucas observed Ryan's interactions with Sophie. Ryan was visibly trying to impress her, bragging about his family's ventures, and hinting that he was looking for partners to help expand their reach. Sophie listened politely but remained non-committal, her face betraying nothing. Lucas smirked inwardly. It was clear Ryan was desperate, and Sophie was wise enough to see through his charade. When the event wound down, Lucas found himself standing on the rooftop terrace, gazing out at the city lights. He felt a presence beside him and turned to find Sophie standing there, her arms crossed, watching him intently. "Luke," she began, her voice lower and more serious. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but let me give you a piece of advice. In this world, there are two kinds of people, those who survive and those who get consumed by the game. Which one are you?" Lucas looked out over the skyline, choosing his words carefully. "I suppose that depends on the rules of the game," he replied. "But I have no intention of getting consumed." Sophie studied him, her expression thoughtful. "Good answer," she said finally. "Just remember, trust is rare in our world. Be careful who you align yourself with." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Lucas alone with his thoughts. The encounter with Sophie left Lucas with a strange feeling. Part of him was cautious, sensing that Sophie was someone who could easily unravel his plans if she chose to. But another part of him saw her as a potential ally, someone who shared his cynicism about the world of wealth and influence. If he could win her trust, she might prove useful in his quest to expose the true colors of people like Ryan and Sarah. Over the following days, Lucas found himself increasingly pulled into Ryan's business affairs. Ryan, seeing him as a valuable connection, began inviting him to strategy meetings and gatherings with other potential investors. It was during these meetings that Lucas witnessed the full extent of Ryan's desperation. His pitch was shaky, his business plans vague, and his confidence paper-thin. But he was doing everything he could to keep up appearances, clinging to the last remnants of his family's reputation. One afternoon, during a private meeting at a trendy cafe, Ryan turned to Lucas, his face serious. "Luke, I'll be honest with you. My family's business is going through a rough patch," he admitted, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. "But with the right support, I believe we can turn things around. I need someone like you on my side." Lucas listened, hiding his satisfaction. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. Ryan, the boy who had once humiliated him for his lack of wealth, was now pleading for his help. The irony was almost too sweet, but Lucas kept his tone neutral, nodding thoughtfully. "It sounds like an interesting opportunity," he replied, maintaining his facade. "I'll need to review the details, of course, but I'm open to discussing a potential partnership." Ryan's eyes lit up with relief. "Thank you, Luke. I knew I could count on you. With your support, we can keep the Carter legacy alive." As they shook hands, Lucas felt a thrill of victory. He had Ryan exactly where he wanted him, and the game was only just beginning. Now, with Ryan reliant on his support, Lucas could tighten his grip, slowly revealing the truths that Ryan and Sarah had buried beneath layers of wealth and pretense. Lucas left the cafe, feeling more powerful than ever. The stage was set, and the next moves would be critical. But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the lingering thought of Sophie's warning. Trust was a rare commodity, and deception a dangerous game. He would need to be careful, navigating the fine line between ally and adversary as he continued his journey toward justice and revenge. In the days following his meeting with Ryan, Lucas grew more entrenched in the Carter family's web of deception and desperation. Ryan, oblivious to the true nature of Luke Caldwell, had taken him into confidence, viewing him as the lifeline his family's failing business desperately needed. Each day, Lucas received updates from Ryan, complete with hastily crafted financial statements and poorly thought out plans. Ryan seemed convinced that Lucas was his golden ticket, but Lucas saw it for what it was, a man clinging to the last straws of a crumbling empire. Meanwhile, Lucas continued to gather intelligence on the Carter family, uncovering layers of debts, failed ventures, and desperate investments. Ryan's father, it turned out, had once been a respected business figure, but had made reckless decisions, including investing in a chain of luxury hotels that had quickly fallen apart. Lucas found it almost poetic that the very family who had looked down on him for his poverty was barely holding on to their facade of wealth. One evening, Ryan invited Lucas to his family's estate for an exclusive dinner. It was an invitation Lucas couldn't refuse. It was his chance to see the Carters up close, to witness firsthand the dysfunction he had only read about on paper. As he arrived, the sprawling mansion was everything he expected, ornate, but with subtle signs of wear. The fountain in the front yard was dry, the garden less tended than he remembered. For all its grandeur, the estate was showing signs of neglect, just like the family itself. Inside, he was greeted by Ryan and his father, Gregory Carter, a man who, despite his declining fortune, held himself with the air of someone accustomed to power. Gregory gave Lucas a firm handshake, his eyes scanning him as though assessing his worth. "So, Luke," Gregory said, his tone both cordial and condescending, "Ryan tells me you're interested in investing in our ventures." Lucas nodded, giving a small, respectful smile. "It seems like a promising opportunity," he replied smoothly. "With a few adjustments, I believe there's potential for growth." Gregory looked pleased, though Lucas could tell it was only a surface-level satisfaction. The older man's eyes betrayed an underlying anxiety, a desperation to believe in something, anything, that could save his legacy. Dinner was served shortly after, with the Carters putting on their best faces, laughing and reminiscing about their families' illustrious history. Lucas listened politely, playing along, but his thoughts drifted as he observed them closely. It didn't take long for the conversation to shift to more pressing matters. Gregory, perhaps emboldened by wine, leaned forward, his tone shifting to one of urgency. "Luke, we need someone who can see the bigger picture, someone willing to invest in the long term. I'm sure Ryan has told you, we're in a challenging position at the moment. But with your help, I believe we could restore what we've built." Lucas suppressed a smirk. The elder Carter was practically begging for help. "Of course," he replied, keeping his voice even. "I'm willing to discuss a partnership. However, I'll need full transparency. No secrets. Complete access to the books." Ryan and Gregory exchanged a quick, uneasy glance. It was clear they hadn't anticipated such a bold demand, but their desperation left them no room to refuse. "We can arrange that," Gregory replied after a pause, his voice tense. "As long as we can count on your support, you'll have access to everything." Lucas gave a satisfied nod, knowing he had secured exactly what he needed. He had penetrated the Carter family's inner circle, and now, he held the power to control the next moves in their financial game. After dinner, Lucas made his way out of the mansion, catching a glimpse of Sarah as he left. She was watching him from a distance, her expression unreadable. Lucas had kept his interactions with her minimal, knowing she would be the most difficult to deceive if he got too close. But tonight she seemed different, almost vulnerable. "Luke," she called out, stopping him just as he reached his car. "Can we talk?" Lucas turned, pretending to look mildly surprised. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Sarah hesitated, her gaze shifting between him and the ground, as though she were struggling to find the right words. "I just wanted to say, thank you. Ryan's been under a lot of pressure, and I know he sees you as, well, as someone he can trust." Lucas forced himself to maintain his calm facade, though the irony nearly made him laugh. Trust was the last thing he wanted from any of them. But he smiled gently, nodding in acknowledgement. "Ryan's a good guy. I'm happy to help him out." Sarah looked relieved, giving him a small smile in return. "It's just, I know things between us got complicated, but I hope there's no hard feelings." For a moment, Lucas felt a pang of anger rise within him. No hard feelings? He thought back to the night she had humiliated him, standing by Ryan's side as if he were the better man, as if Lucas were nothing. But he forced the anger down, masking it with an understanding nod. "Of course not," he replied, his voice calm. "We were both young. Things change." Sarah seemed comforted by his response, but Lucas knew he couldn't let himself be swayed by her words. He was here for a purpose, and her sudden show of kindness wouldn't alter his course. He had a plan, and he was getting closer to achieving it with each day. In the following weeks, Lucas dove deeper into the Carter family's affairs, attending board meetings, reviewing their finances, and subtly inserting himself into their business decisions. He played the part of the supportive investor, offering strategic advice and occasionally financing minor expenses to build trust. Ryan and Gregory believed they were gaining a valuable ally, but Lucas was using every interaction to strengthen his position. As he became more involved, he also grew closer to Sophie Kingston, who had remained cautiously friendly since their first meeting. Sophie, still suspicious of Luke Caldwell, took an interest in his involvement with the Carters. She saw through their facade and knew they were desperate, but Lucas could sense that she still hadn't fully figured him out. One afternoon, Sophie invited him to a private meeting, her tone serious. "Luke, I don't know what you're really after with the Carters, but I'd be careful. Their family is notorious for playing dirty, especially when they're cornered." Lucas gave her a reassuring smile. "I appreciate the concern, Sophie, but I'm fully aware of what I'm dealing with." She sighed, crossing her arms. "Just don't let them drag you down with them. Their business is a sinking ship, and if you're not careful, you'll go down with it." Lucas knew she was right, of course, but he couldn't reveal his true intentions. "Don't worry. I know how to handle myself," he replied, keeping his tone light. "Besides, I have a few cards up my sleeve." Sophie regarded him carefully, then nodded. "Just don't underestimate them, Luke. Sometimes people are more dangerous when they're desperate." As she left, Lucas felt a momentary flicker of doubt. Sophie was sharp, and her warning lingered in his mind. But he brushed it off, reminding himself that he was in control. He had come too far to let doubt weaken his resolve. Returning to his office, Lucas reviewed his notes, his mind sharp and focused. He was finally in the perfect position to pull the strings, to expose Ryan's lies and watch the Carters' empire crumble. The table was set, the players were in place, and the next move would be his to make. Lucas leaned back, a cold smile spreading across his face. He was no longer the humiliated boy from high school. He was a man with power, purpose, and vengeance in his heart. And soon, the Carter family would know what it was like to be on the losing side. Lucas's control over the Carter family's empire grew, as he subtly steered Ryan and Gregory into increasingly desperate financial moves. He introduced investments that sounded lucrative but were, in reality, traps. These opportunities seemed promising on the surface, but they required substantial upfront capital that the Carters didn't have. In their desperation to maintain appearances, Ryan and Gregory took loans, convinced that each risky step would ultimately restore their former glory. Each decision tightened Lucas's grip over their business, and he watched as they unknowingly surrendered more control. With every meeting, he observed their faces grow wearier, their eyes more anxious. Yet they were still blind to the trap closing around them. During one particularly intense meeting, Ryan pulled Lucas aside, his face pale and eyes hollow. "Luke, I need to ask you a favor. They're worse than I thought. My father's too proud to admit it, but we're really struggling. We need a bigger investment just to get us through this rough patch. I know it's a lot, but you're the only one who can help us." Lucas fought to keep a neutral expression, though he felt a surge of satisfaction at seeing Ryan so vulnerable. The tables had fully turned. The same man who once mocked Lucas for his poverty was now practically begging him for help. "Ryan, I understand the pressure you're under," Lucas replied, keeping his tone calm. "But this is a significant investment. If I put in more, I'll need something in return, full control over the decision-making process. You and your father can remain the face of the company, but I'll handle the internal operations." Ryan's face tightened, but he nodded, desperation overriding his pride. "Fine. Whatever it takes. Just help us get through this. Once we're back on our feet, I swear, we'll make it worth your while." Lucas nodded, hiding his satisfaction. "We'll get through it, Ryan. I'm sure of it." As he left the meeting, Lucas felt his plan solidifying. With full control over the Carters' company, He could reveal the financial ruin they were hiding and leave them with nothing. The irony of it all was too perfect. The very people who had once looked down on him would lose everything, while he would emerge as the victor. But as Lucas continued to execute his plan, something unexpected happened. Sophie Kingston reappeared, taking a closer interest in his involvement with the Carters. One afternoon, she invited him to lunch at an upscale restaurant, her demeanor more serious than usual. "Luke, I have to ask," she began, setting her gaze on him. "What's your real agenda with the Carters? You've integrated yourself into their business so quickly, and they're practically dependent on you. Don't take this the wrong way, but I know there's more to your story." Lucas took a moment to consider his response. Sophie was sharp, too sharp, and he knew that one wrong word could unravel his entire facade. He gave her a small, polite smile. "I understand your concern, Sophie. But there's no hidden agenda here. Ryan and I are just mutually benefiting from our arrangement. It's all business." Sophie's eyes narrowed, studying him carefully. "Business or not, there's something off about all of this. I don't think you're just here for profit, Luke. And for what it's worth, I think the Carters are in deeper trouble than they realize." Lucas met her gaze evenly, not breaking eye contact. "You're right, they're in trouble. And if I can help them and profit from it, I see no harm. Isn't that the basis of most business partnerships?" Sophie held his gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. "I suppose you're right. Just be careful. I've known the Carters for a long time, and they can be ruthless when they feel threatened." Lucas gave a small nod, but he couldn't ignore the tension building between them. Sophie was clearly suspicious, and he sensed that she wouldn't let the matter go so easily. As they finished lunch, he realized that Sophie might eventually become a problem, a loose thread that could unravel his carefully constructed plan. That evening, Lucas returned to his apartment, deep in thought. He had underestimated Sophie's intuition, and now he would have to tread carefully around her. The closer he got to dismantling the Carters, the more dangerous his position became. But he was too far in to turn back now. Just as he was contemplating his next move, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Sarah. She wanted to meet, saying she needed to talk. Lucas hesitated, his mind flashing back to the humiliation she had inflicted on him that night at the restaurant. Part of him wanted nothing to do with her, but another part was curious to see what she had to say now that he was Luke Caldwell. They agreed to meet at a small, discreet cafe on the edge of the city. When he arrived, Sarah was already there, looking nervous and out of place. She greeted him with a hesitant smile, her eyes searching his face as if trying to read his thoughts. "Luke, thank you for meeting me," she said softly, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. Lucas nodded, maintaining his composure. "Of course. What did you want to talk about?" She hesitated, taking a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I know things didn't end well between us, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I shouldn't have treated you the way I did." Her apology took Lucas by surprise, though he kept his expression neutral. "I appreciate that," he replied calmly. "But we were both young. People make mistakes." Sarah's shoulders relaxed slightly, as though she had feared he would reject her apology. "Thank you? I don't know why I acted the way I did. I guess I was scared. Scared of not having enough, of not being secure. But it was wrong of me to treat you like that." Lucas watched her carefully, noting the vulnerability in her expression. For a brief moment, he felt a flicker of the old affection he had once felt for her. But he reminded himself of her betrayal, of the humiliation she had inflicted on him, and steeled himself against any lingering emotions. "Sarah, people change," he said, his voice steady. "We all have to find our own way." She nodded, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I know. I just wanted you to know that I regret the way things ended." They parted ways shortly after, and as Lucas walked back to his car, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him wanted to forgive her, to leave the past behind and focus solely on his future. But another part, a darker, more vengeful part, was determined to make her understand the pain she had caused. Over the next few weeks, Lucas continued his slow dismantling of the Carter empire. He pushed them to make increasingly reckless decisions, all while playing the role of a loyal partner. Gregory Carter's confidence began to waver, his once proud demeanor cracking as the pressure mounted. Ryan, meanwhile, was oblivious to the fact that his own desperation was accelerating their downfall. Then, just as Lucas was nearing the final stages of his plan, he received an unexpected call from Sophie Kingston. Her voice was tense, her tone laced with urgency. "Luke, we need to talk. It's about the Carters, and you." Lucas's heart skipped a beat, but he kept his tone calm. "Of course. When and where?" "Tomorrow. My office. 10 a.m. sharp," she replied, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. As he ended the call, Lucas felt a knot form in his stomach. Sophie had seen through his charade, and if she had figured out his true intentions, everything he had worked for could come crashing down. He knew he couldn't let that happen. The stage was set for his most crucial move yet. Sophie Kingston was now the last obstacle standing between him and the ultimate revenge he had sought for so long. The next morning, Lucas arrived at Sophie Kingston's office with his mind racing. The stakes had never been higher. Sophie, a formidable figure in her own right, was the only person who seemed capable of dismantling his carefully crafted plan. As he walked through the polished lobby and rode the elevator up to her floor, he rehearsed his responses, calculating every word he might need to say to keep her at bay. When he entered her office, Sophie was already seated behind her desk, her expression serious. She gestured for him to sit, and Lucas took a seat, doing his best to project calm confidence. Sophie wasted no time. "Luke, or should I say Lucas McKay?" Lucas felt a chill run down his spine but managed to keep his face neutral. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Sophie," he replied, though he knew he was caught. Sophie leaned forward, her eyes sharp and unyielding. "Don't insult my intelligence, Lucas. I've looked into you. There's no Luke Caldwell in the world of real estate investments. But Lucas McKay? A nobody, raised in a poor neighborhood, once in a relationship with Sarah Dawson and bullied by Ryan Carter? That story checks out." Lucas's calm facade nearly cracked, but he quickly composed himself. "So you've done your homework," he replied, his voice even. "What do you want, Sophie?" She crossed her arms, studying him intently. "I want to understand why you're doing this. You've gone through a lot of effort to disguise yourself, to infiltrate the Carters' lives, and I can't help but wonder, why? Revenge? Is that it?" Lucas hesitated, the urge to defend his actions bubbling up within him. But he knew he had to choose his words carefully. Sophie was perceptive, and any misstep could ruin everything. "Let's just say it's about justice," he replied, his voice steady. "The Carters have a way of making people feel small, worthless. They've used their wealth to manipulate, to hurt others, and it's time they understood what it's like to be on the losing side." Sophie tilted her head, considering his words. "So it's about teaching them a lesson? And you think that by bringing down their empire, you'll somehow even the score?" Lucas met her gaze, refusing to look away. "It's more than that. This isn't just about me. They've hurt others too. They've created a legacy of cruelty, and it's time someone put an end to it." Sophie was silent for a moment, her expression unreadable. "I don't disagree that the Carters have done harm," she said finally. "But what you're doing, Lucas, it's dangerous. And once you start down this path, there's no going back." Lucas felt a flicker of uncertainty, but he quickly suppressed it. He had come too far to let doubt weaken his resolve. "I'm aware of the risks, Sophie. But I didn't come this far just to walk away." Sophie sighed, her eyes softening slightly. "You've been hurt, Lucas. And I understand why you want to make them pay. But revenge has a way of consuming people. You might think you're in control, but once you cross that line, it's hard to turn back." Lucas clenched his jaw, the memories of humiliation and betrayal flooding back. "I appreciate your concern, Sophie, but I know what I'm doing." Sophie studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. "If that's your choice, then I won't stand in your way. But I'll offer you one piece of advice: don't lose yourself in this. There's a fine line between justice and obsession, and if you cross it, you may find yourself no better than the people you're fighting against." Lucas felt a strange mixture of gratitude and frustration. He appreciated Sophie's insight, but he wasn't prepared to let her moral judgments sway him. "Thank you, Sophie. I'll keep that in mind," she sighed, giving him one last measured look. "I hope you do. Because if you let this consume you, you may find yourself alone in the end. As he left her office, Lucas couldn't shake Sophie's words. She had struck a nerve, and for a brief moment, he wondered if he was indeed walking down a dangerous path. But the thought of Ryan and Sarah, of their cruelty, their betrayal, fueled his determination. They needed to face the consequences of their actions, and he would be the one to deliver them. In the following days, Lucas doubled down on his efforts. He guided Ryan and Gregory into riskier investments, watching as they sank deeper into financial turmoil. Ryan, now fully dependent on Lucas, began showing signs of strain, his once confident demeanor replaced by anxiety and desperation. During a late-night meeting, Ryan looked at Lucas with a mixture of hope and exhaustion. "Luke, we're so close. If we just make one more move, we can turn this around." "I know we can." Lucas gave a sympathetic nod, though he felt nothing but satisfaction. "I'm with you, Ryan. But remember, this is the final push. If we don't succeed, there won't be another chance." Ryan nodded, his face grim. "I understand. And thank you, Luke. I don't know what we'd do without you." The words stung with irony, but Lucas kept his expression neutral. "I'm glad to help, Ryan. Let's finish this." As the meeting ended, Lucas felt a surge of triumph. Ryan was completely under his control, and the Carter empire was on the verge of collapse. But as he returned home, Sophie's warning echoed in his mind. He could feel the toll of his deception, the weight of the lies he had spun around himself. And for the first time, he wondered if he could truly walk away unscathed. The next day, Lucas was invited to a charity gala that Ryan and Sarah were hosting. He knew it would be a crucial moment in his plan, a public setting where he could subtly reveal the truth without saying a word. Dressed in a sharp tuxedo, Lucas arrived at the event, observing the opulence and extravagance that had once seemed so unreachable. He saw Ryan and Sarah mingling with guests, laughing and putting on a facade of wealth and success. But Lucas knew it was all a lie, and tonight, he would begin to unravel it. During the event, Lucas struck up conversations with key figures in the room, carefully hinting at the Carters' struggles without revealing his direct involvement. He mentioned their recent challenges, in passing, planting seeds of doubt among the wealthy guests who had once admired the Carters. By the end of the night, whispers filled the air, speculation and suspicion spreading like wildfire. Sarah, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, approached Lucas with a forced smile. "Luke, is everything all right? I feel like something's off tonight." Lucas looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I wouldn't worry, Sarah. Sometimes people are just curious, especially when things aren't quite as they seem." Sarah's face paled, her smile faltering. "What do you mean by that?" He gave her a calm, enigmatic smile. "Just that appearances can be deceiving. But I'm sure you already know that." As he walked away, he could feel Sarah's confusion and fear, the first crack in her perfect image. Lucas knew the seeds of doubt he had planted would grow, slowly revealing the Carters' fragile foundation. It was only a matter of time before their world crumbled. But as he left the gala, a strange feeling of emptiness settled over him. For all his success, for all the steps he had taken to bring down the Carters, he couldn't shake Sophie's words from his mind. Was he truly in control, or was he losing himself in his quest for revenge? The night ended with Lucas standing alone, watching the city lights from his apartment. He had come so far, but as he looked out over the skyline, he couldn't escape the nagging question that lingered in his mind. Would this revenge really bring him peace, or was he destined to become just another casualty of his own ambition? In the days following the gala, rumors about the Carters' financial struggles spread rapidly. Lucas had orchestrated every detail, ensuring that the whispers of their failing business reached the right ears. He knew the city's wealthy elite had little tolerance for weakness, and he watched with satisfaction as the first dominoes began to fall. Ryan was frantic, his confidence all but gone. He called Lucas incessantly, asking for advice, pleading for guidance. The desperation in his voice was palpable, a far cry from the arrogant bully Lucas remembered. Every call, every frantic message, reminded Lucas of the nights he had spent feeling worthless because of Ryan's mockery. Now, Ryan was the one feeling powerless, and Lucas was the one in control. But Ryan wasn't the only one struggling. Sarah, once so poised and confident, seemed shaken as well. At a business luncheon that Lucas attended, he noticed her sitting alone, her eyes darting around nervously. He approached her casually, pretending not to notice her discomfort. "Sarah, you look like you could use some company," he said, his tone light. She looked up at him, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Luke, I don't know what's happening. Things are falling apart, and Ryan, he's not himself." Lucas nodded, feigning sympathy. "These are tough times. But sometimes, hardship reveals what people are truly made of." Sarah swallowed, her gaze dropping to her hands. I thought we were on top of the world, you know. But now, it feels like everything is slipping away." For a brief moment, Lucas felt a twinge of pity. Sarah, despite her shallow desires, seemed genuinely lost. But he reminded himself of the humiliation she had inflicted on him, of the heartache she had caused. This was her reckoning as much as it was Ryan's. He offered her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Sarah. Sometimes things have to fall apart to make way for something better." As he walked away, Lucas felt a surge of satisfaction. The Carters' perfect world was collapsing, just as he had planned. They were beginning to understand what it felt like to live in fear, to feel insecure and uncertain. And he was just getting started. The final blow came unexpectedly. One of Lucas's well-placed leaks had reached a major investor who had been considering a partnership with the Carters. The investor withdrew at the last minute, citing concerns about financial stability. It was the final straw. Word spread quickly, and within days other investors followed suit. The Carters' empire, once a symbol of wealth and power, was teetering on the brink of ruin. Ryan, overwhelmed by the unraveling of his family's fortune, called Lucas in a panic. "Luke, you have to help me. I don't know what happened. Everything's falling apart. We're going to lose everything if we don't do something." Lucas listened, his expression unreadable. He could hear the fear in Ryan's voice, the desperation that only someone on the verge of losing everything could feel. It was the same desperation Lucas had once felt, back when he was at his lowest. "Ryan, I'm sorry," he said calmly. "But I don't think there's much more I can do. This is beyond my control." Ryan's voice cracked. "Please, look. I thought we were friends. I thought you'd help me." "Friends?" The word hung in the air, almost laughable. Friends don't humiliate each other. Friends don't betray each other for status or wealth. But Lucas kept his voice steady, showing no hint of the satisfaction he felt. "Sometimes, Ryan, we have to face the consequences of our actions. Maybe this is your opportunity to do that." Ryan was silent, his breathing heavy. Finally, he muttered, I understand." As Lucas ended the call, he felt a strange sense of closure. Ryan was finally paying for his arrogance, for the years of cruelty he had inflicted on others. It was poetic justice, and Lucas relished the moment. But as the days passed, Lucas began to feel a growing emptiness. He had achieved his goal, yet there was no sense of triumph, no peace. He watched as Ryan and Gregory struggled to salvage what remained of their empire, each day bringing them closer to total ruin. The world he had set out to destroy was crumbling before his eyes, yet he felt no satisfaction. One evening, as he was reviewing the final stages of his plan, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Sophie. "I warned you, Lucas. Be careful what you wish for. Let's meet. Tomorrow. My office. Noon." Her words unsettled him, stirring a sense of unease he couldn't ignore. Sophie had been the one voice of caution in this entire ordeal, and as much as he hated to admit it, he felt a strange respect for her. She had seen through him from the beginning, and he knew that ignoring her warning could be a mistake. The next day, Lucas arrived at Sophie's office, feeling a sense of trepidation he hadn't felt in years. Sophie greeted him with a somber expression, her usual sharpness softened by a look of concern. "Lucas," she began, her tone unusually gentle, "I think you know why I called you here." He nodded, though he remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "You've achieved what you set out to do. The Carters are on the verge of losing everything. But I can't help but wonder, at what cost?" She paused, her gaze piercing. "You've become so focused on bringing them down that you've lost sight of who you are. Revenge has a way of consuming people, and I'm worried it's already consumed you." Lucas clenched his jaw, her words hitting closer to home than he cared to admit. He had told himself that this was about justice, about making the Carters pay for their cruelty. But somewhere along the way, his desire for revenge had overshadowed everything else. Sophie continued, her voice steady but compassionate. I know the Carters wronged you. I know they hurt you deeply. But think about this. What happens when they're gone? What do you have left? Are you prepared to live with the consequences of your actions? Lucas looked away, feeling a knot form in his stomach. He had been so driven by anger and resentment that he hadn't considered what came next. The destruction of the Carters' empire had been his sole focus, his purpose. But now that it was nearly complete, he was left with a hollow sense of accomplishment. Sophie's voice softened. Lucas, you're not the same person I met a few months ago. This obsession with revenge has changed you. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you carry yourself. You've become someone I don't think you wanted to be. Her words lingered in the air, each one piercing deeper than the last. Lucas felt a wave of shame, the weight of his actions settling on him like a heavy burden. He had justified everything as justice, but the reality was that he had let his hatred consume him. After a long silence, he finally spoke, his voice low. So what do I do now? I've come so far, and I don't know if I can stop. Sophie reached across the desk, placing a hand on his arm. You don't have to lose yourself, Lucas. You can choose to be better. Leave the Carters to face the consequences on their own terms. Let them fall, but don't drag yourself down with them. Lucas met her gaze, seeing a mixture of empathy and determination in her eyes. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope, a chance to reclaim the parts of himself he had lost. As he left Sophie's office, Lucas made a decision. He would step back, letting the Carters' empire collapse on its own. He had set the wheels in motion, but he didn't need to be there to see it fall. There was no need for further manipulation, no need for more lies. The Carters would face their fate, and he would finally be free. That evening, Lucas stood alone on his apartment balcony, looking out over the city lights. He felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow, knowing that he was letting go of the revenge he had clung to for so long. But as he looked out over the skyline, he felt something else, a sense of peace, the beginning of healing. Lucas took a deep breath, his heart lighter than it had been in years. He had been given a second chance, and he was determined not to waste it. The Carters would face their downfall, but he would rise above it, leaving his past behind as he moved toward a future of his own making. The news broke just days after Lucas decided to step back. Carter Enterprises was on the brink of bankruptcy. Reports flooded financial media outlets, with headlines speculating about the cause of the sudden collapse of what was once one of the city's most esteemed family businesses. The world was now watching as the Carters, once untouchable, grappled with the ruins of their empire. Lucas observed everything from a distance, feeling an unexpected calm. He no longer needed to be involved. The wheels of downfall were already turning, and there was no stopping them. He had left the final pieces of their destruction to fall naturally, allowing the consequences of their reckless decisions and years of arrogance to take their course. And while the satisfaction of revenge lingered, it was now balanced by a sense of release. Ryan and Gregory Carter were rarely seen in public, though news outlets speculated wildly about their situation. Their lavish mansion was put up for sale, their luxury cars repossessed, and whispers circulated that Gregory Carter was facing lawsuits from investors seeking to recover losses. The fall from grace was absolute, and the same people who had once revered them now watched in morbid fascination as their world crumbled. Lucas received a message from Ryan, his tone pleading and confused. Luke, I don't know how this all went so wrong. Everything just fell apart. I don't even know what to say. I don't know who to turn to. Lucas considered the message carefully, a mix of emotions stirring within him. Ryan was reaching out to him as a last resort, but Lucas had no obligation to respond. This was the moment he had dreamed of, the tables turned, his former bully now desperate and lost. And yet something within him had shifted. In the end, Lucas didn't reply. He let the message go unanswered, a quiet acknowledgement that he no longer needed validation from Ryan. The revenge he had sought was complete, and he was ready to leave the past behind. As he turned his attention to his own ventures, Lucas found that he had gained more than just financial control through his experiences. He had forged new connections, gained a deeper understanding of business, and most importantly, rediscovered his sense of purpose. With the Carters out of the picture, he could focus on building something meaningful, something he could truly call his own. Sophie Kingston, who had been his unexpected ally and moral compass, continued to reach out. Their conversations evolved beyond the Carter saga, and she began to see him not as the vengeful Lucas McKay but as a man with potential. She encouraged him to channel his skills into constructive projects, pushing him to find ways to make a genuine difference. One day, Sophie proposed a venture, a foundation aimed at providing educational opportunities for underprivileged youth. "It could be a way to turn your experiences into something positive," she suggested, her tone encouraging yet firm. "Use what you've learned, the struggles you've faced, to help others who are going through what you did." The idea struck a chord in Lucas. He thought back to the years he had spent struggling, working hard for every small achievement, and the feeling of being invisible in a world dominated by wealth and power. He had endured hardship, and if there was a way to prevent others from experiencing the same sense of hopelessness, he felt it was a cause worth pursuing. "Let's do it," he replied, a sense of conviction resonating in his voice. The foundation became his new focus, and Lucas found himself dedicating long hours to its development. For the first time in years, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a purpose that extended beyond himself. In the months that followed, Lucas's foundation gained traction, earning praise for its impact on local communities. He worked tirelessly, partnering with schools, developing mentorship programs, and creating scholarships for students who came from disadvantaged backgrounds. His story, once one of revenge and deception, was now transforming into one of redemption and growth. Sophie, who had become not only a mentor but a friend, watched with pride as Lucas's work flourished. She admired his dedication, knowing that he had found a way to reclaim his identity without succumbing to the darker impulses that had once driven him. Their bond deepened, built on mutual respect and shared values. One evening, as they stood together at a fundraising event for the foundation, Sophie turned to him with a smile. "You've come a long way, Lucas. This is what I always knew you were capable of." Lucas nodded, feeling a warmth that was entirely new. "I never would have thought I'd end up here," he admitted. "But you were right. I needed to let go of the anger. It was only holding me back." Sophie gave his arm a reassuring squeeze. "Sometimes, we need to go through the fire to see what we're truly made of. You just needed a push in the right direction." As the night wore on, Lucas looked out over the crowd, feeling a sense of belonging that he hadn't felt in years. This was his world now, a world he had built not through deception or revenge, but through hard work and genuine impact. The foundation he had created was his legacy, a testament to his journey from humiliation to healing. In time, the Carters faded from his life completely. Ryan and Gregory, still reeling from the collapse of their empire, retreated into obscurity. Their story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how arrogance and hubris could lead to ruin. Lucas no longer thought of them with bitterness or resentment. They were simply a chapter he had closed. As he walked through the event that evening, Lucas felt a sense of pride and peace that he had once thought impossible. He had reclaimed his identity, found his purpose, and discovered that true wealth wasn't measured in money or power, but in the lives he could uplift and the legacy he could leave behind. The past, with all its pain and betrayal, had shaped him, but it no longer defined him. Lucas McKay had finally stepped into his own, free from the shadows of revenge, ready to embrace the future he had built with his own hands. Months passed, and Lucas's life took on a steady rhythm, one defined by purpose and fulfillment. The foundation continued to grow, expanding into new cities and gaining recognition for its dedication to providing opportunities for those who, like Lucas, had faced difficult beginnings. It wasn't just about money or resources. It was about giving people a sense of worth, about helping them see that they, too, could change the course of their lives. Lucas had poured his heart and soul into this mission, and the foundation's success became a reflection of his own transformation. He had come a long way from the boy who had been humiliated for his lack of wealth, the young man who had felt powerless and invisible. He was no longer driven by anger or revenge. Instead, he was motivated by a genuine desire to make a difference. The impact of his work extended beyond the foundation itself. Lucas became a mentor to many of the young people he helped, sharing his story openly and encouraging them to rise above their circumstances. He spoke at schools, universities, and conferences, inspiring others to pursue their dreams despite adversity. Each time he shared his journey, he felt a weight lift, a reminder that he had moved on from the darkness of his past. Sophie remained by his side throughout it all, supporting his endeavors and encouraging him to reach new heights. Their friendship blossomed into something deeper, a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and shared values. They were equals, each bringing out the best in the other. Over time, Lucas realized that Sophie had not only been a mentor but also his anchor, guiding him back when he had strayed into dangerous territory. Her belief in him had become a source of strength, and their bond grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, as they walked through the city streets after a foundation event, Lucas turned to Sophie with a smile. "You know, I never thought I'd end up here. There was a time when I couldn't imagine a future beyond, well, revenge." Sophie laughed softly, her eyes warm. "I knew you were more than that, Lucas. I always saw the potential in you, even when you couldn't see it in yourself." He reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Thank you for believing in me. For helping me see that I didn't have to let the past define me." Sophie smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "It's all you, Lucas. You're the one who made the choice to be better. You turned your pain into purpose. I just reminded you of what you were capable of." As they walked, Lucas felt a profound sense of gratitude, not only for Sophie but for the journey he had been on. The hardships, the betrayals, even the mistakes, each moment had shaped him, leading him to the person he had become. He had faced his demons, overcome his anger, and found peace in a life dedicated to something greater than himself. One day, Lucas received an invitation to speak at a prestigious charity event, where he would be honored for his work with the foundation. As he stood before the crowd that evening, he looked out over the faces of those who had supported him, believed in him, and inspired him. Sophie sat in the front row, her eyes filled with pride and encouragement. Taking a deep breath, Lucas began his speech. "When I was younger, I didn't have much. I grew up thinking that wealth was what defined a person, that without money, I would always be invisible. I let that belief shape me for a long time, and it led me down a path that almost consumed me. But I was given a second chance, a chance to redefine what true wealth means. And I realized that real wealth isn't about money or power, it's about the impact we have on others, the lives we touch, and the legacy we leave behind." He paused, the silence in the room palpable, every eye on him. "Today, I stand here not as someone who sought revenge, but as someone who chose to rise above it. I'm here because people believed in me, because they reminded me that we all have the power to change, to become better. And now, my mission is to pass that belief on to others. Because every person, no matter where they come from or what they've been through, has the potential to make a difference." The crowd erupted in applause, and as Lucas stepped back from the podium, he felt a sense of closure wash over him. He had finally left the shadows of his past behind, standing tall as a man with a legacy of his own making. In the following years, Lucas's foundation became a force for change, expanding across the country and beyond. He and Sophie continued to work side by side, their partnership growing both personally and professionally. They built a life together founded on shared values and mutual respect, each bringing out the best in the other. Lucas's story became an inspiration to many. He was invited to speak at conferences and events around the world, sharing his journey from a boy who had felt insignificant to a man who had found purpose through compassion and resilience. His work touched countless lives, and his legacy grew with each life he changed. Looking back, Lucas knew that the road he had traveled had been difficult, filled with pain, betrayal, and moments of darkness. But he had emerged from it stronger, wiser, and with a heart open to the possibility of healing. The hardships he had endured had not defined him, they had refined him, shaping him into someone capable of love, forgiveness, and genuine impact. In the end, Lucas McKay had achieved something far greater than revenge. He had found redemption, purpose, and a life filled with meaning. And as he looked to the future, he knew that his journey was far from over. There were more lives to touch, more barriers to break, and more hope to spread. As Lucas stood on the balcony of his home, looking out over the city he had once felt so small within, he felt a deep sense of peace. His legacy was not one of wealth or power, but of transformation, a testament to the power of resilience, growth, and the choice to rise above even the deepest wounds. With Sophie by his side, Lucas embraced the life he had built, knowing that the impact of his story would ripple through generations to come. He had created something that would outlast him, a beacon of hope for those who needed to see that they, too, could overcome their past and create a future worth living for. And for the first time, Lucas McKay was truly free. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. These other stories will move you too. Have a good session.